Last week, I talked about spiritual battles during my sermon, but there was one thing that I didn't mention, which I think it's important for you guys to know. It's when you successfully endure the fierce spiritual battles, you're going to witness great spiritual fruit afterwards, okay? It's very tough to fight against the evil spirits, but when you finally endure the struggle through prayers, you're going to find an overflowing satisfaction in your heart. And you will also, on top of that, witness some spiritual changes in and around you. Now, I shared with you guys that I went through a lot last week because a spiritually important event was about to happen at our church. And just like how Jesus ministered even to the criminals on the cross, the people who were on his side, I also endured the hard time and plowed through the battle by the grace of God. And after going through, that tough week, I sensed that God was restoring my life back to normal. And on top of that, I could see how he was manifesting by letting me witness some great fruits around me. And one of the most significant fruits that I recently discovered was this: asking difficult questions, meaning you guys have started to ask me some difficult questions, which is fascinating. As a pastor, I often feel insecure or have doubts about myself, just like some of you guys, because what I do sometimes feel very much meaningless, right? Sometimes feel as if I'm talking to a wall on Sundays or on Fridays. And I feel overly tired when I find out that people don't really care or people don't really change. And on top of that, when the attendance on Sunday worship drops on top of all these other stressful things because of your busy schoolwork or the work situations, I feel kind of discouraged even more because the devil keeps telling me that I'm not a good pastor. It's a temptation that I get all the time. But while all those things are happening, there's one thing that really, really lifts me up greatly, and it's when you guys ask me a very difficult theological question. You might wonder, does Pastor Jonathan enjoy solving, difficult stuff? But no, those things give me a headache. Let me be honest. But I am grateful when you guys ask me some deep theological questions because it just proves that you guys are taking your faith very seriously. It just shows. The fact that you are wondering about certain aspects of your faith really makes me feel relevant and reassures that what I do in High C matters to at least some people. I know there are some people who still don't care, right? Recently I was actually asked by some of the High C students. Some of them approached me after Friday night Bible study and asked me, "Oh, Pastor John, what's this? What's up with this and that?" Right? Some of them actually raised their hands during our baptism and confirmation class, and I encourage you to do that still. And some of them even approached me through text or Instagram DM and whatnot. And even though it takes a long time for me to reply or answer the questions that you guys asked, I was actually overjoyed to witness that some people take some time to think deeply about their faith. And good on you guys. Good on you. And even when, they have questions and doubts about what they believe, I was actually happy to see that they brought it up and asked their spiritual leader to explain the idea. And I think this is the kind of fruits that I'm referring to after the long, fierce spiritual battle that I had to endure. So I want to encourage you all to keep asking questions. If it's like grade 7s, it's not an exemption. Grade 7s, you guys can still ask difficult questions, right? Just keep asking those faith-related questions. It's not wrong to have doubt. Let me put it that way. It's not wrong to have doubt about your faith or about God or about Jesus. Because even one of the greatest disciples in the Bible had doubt about Jesus' resurrection. Who was it? Right there, sitting right there. Tom, right? Thomas. was one of the greatest disciples in the Bible who had doubts about Jesus' resurrection. So, guys, keep asking questions until you fully understand what it means to follow Jesus. Okay, what it means to be a genuine Christian. Anyways, the reason why I say this is because today we're entering into the topic that will trigger a lot of you to have doubts. Throughout the entire human history, well, not entire, but throughout the human history, many people have had doubts when they heard this story. And many people still do, including some of you maybe, because it doesn't really happen in our contemporary society anymore. So you may start to have doubts about, after hearing what I have to preach today, but I want you to open up your heart and prayerfully listen when I unpack today's passage. So today's topic is actually this one. Some heavy stuff, right? Jesus' resurrection. Now, let me ask you a question. Let's do a survey. Can you really, really believe, honestly, truly believe that Jesus was risen from the dead after 3 days? Yeah? Like honestly, truly, from the bottom of your heart? Maybe? If your answer is yes, good on you. And I'm so happy to hear that. And if your answer is no, still good on you. I'm happy to know that you have doubts about these things. And guys, when I say resurrection, what does it mean? I don't just mean a spiritual resurrection, right? Jesus was physically dead. He stopped breathing because he was completely dead. And he then was physically resurrected, risen from the dead. So listening to this idea, can you guys wrap your head around it and believe it? That's my question. Well, let's be honest. To be honest, it's not easy to believe Jesus' bodily resurrection, especially when you're hearing it for the first time. Right? If you grew up at church and heard this idea over and over from Rev Kang or Pastor Stacy, then it might be relatively easy for you to believe it. But if you're new to faith, let's say, right? Or you just started coming back to church, it can be quite hard for you to believe, right? But as I told you guys in the baptism confirmation class, well, some of you guys at least, it's okay to have doubts. It's okay to have weird thoughts in our head. It is okay. We can't really help with having those thoughts entering our head, right? But here's the thing. What matters the most is what? Is your action, which follows those thoughts. So there is this famous saying made by one of the greatest reformers of the past, and his name is Martin Luther. No, it's different from Martin Luther King Jr., right? It's a different person. Now, Martin Luther was a reformer in the 16th century, and he said this. Temptations, of course, cannot be avoided, but because we cannot prevent the birds from flying over our heads, there is no need that we should let them nest in our hair. Well, what does that mean, guys? Well, it basically means this. You cannot keep the devil from suggesting thoughts, right? But you can choose not to dwell or act on them. Okay? So in other words, you can't help having these doubts or thoughts in your head, but you can definitely choose not to put them into an action. So if you have doubts about Jesus' resurrection, what's important is to keep guard over your heart so that you don't end up making a silly mistake of leaving God or standing against him. You go like, oh, Jesus' resurrection? Oh, I can't believe it. Maybe Christianity is a scam and I'm just going to leave it. No, don't do that. Don't put it into an action. Now, if you look into today's passage, you can actually see people making that very mistake of standing against God because of the devil's temptation. Even though they call themselves the worshipers of God, the religious leaders, they went an extra mile to harass Jesus even after he was dead. What a shame, right? So let's see what they did to Jesus after he was dead. Matthew 27, 62 to 65, it says, "The next day, the one after the preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees," so they're the religious leaders, right? "They went to Pilate. 'Sir,' they said, 'we remember that while he was still alive, the deceiver said, "After 3 days, I will rise again." So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and seal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. And this last deception will be worse than the first.'" This is what the religious people actually said. Can you guys believe that? It's crazy, right? You know, many people usually don't know what comes in between Jesus' death and his resurrection. But this is actually what happened. If you look at today's place, we can actually find out how cunning and how evil these religious leaders were. You know, they succeeded in putting Jesus to death. But even after he was gone, they did not stop. Right? They didn't stop harassing him. Notice how they call Jesus the deceiver. Right? Absolute disrespect towards the Son of God. Anyways, as you can see, guys, they went to Pilate again to ask if they could guard Jesus' tomb just in case the disciples steal his body and falsely claim that Jesus resurrected from the dead. Well, they hated Jesus so much to the point they resisted the possibility of Jesus' resurrection. I mean, let's think about it. Those guys were the religious leaders, and they worshiped God, right? They worshiped God. But the most devoted people in the ancient society denied God's own Son because they were blinded by their own ego. They were so self-centered that they couldn't see God's own Son. So by resisting against Jesus' resurrection, they actually sided with the devil. And they tried to disrupt God's plan on earth. So deep in their heart, what was happening? They firmly believed that Jesus could never be risen. So borrowing Martin Luther's quote again, they let the bird build a nest in their hair. What a shame, right? They gave in to the devil's temptation and put their disbelief into an action by disrupting God's plan. But here's the important part, guys. Here's the important part. Did they succeed? No. Well, the answer, of course, is no. No matter how hard they try to guard the tomb with the guards, right? No matter how hard they tried, the Bible testifies that Jesus resurrected after 3 days. So let's see what happened by looking at the following chapter. 28, verses 2 to 4. It says, "There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men." Now, we're not entirely sure whether the guards were actually dead or not, right? But what's important here is that the evil plan of the religious leaders were nullified by the power of God. Despite the eagerness of the religious leaders, no matter how hard they tried, when God wanted something to happen, he made sure that it happened, even if it meant bringing down an angel from the heaven, right? So guys, it's important to know that no matter how hard the humans try to disrupt God's plan, it's never going to work if God is willing to move. Yeah? Because he's all powerful. So through this story, we can be reassured that Jesus' resurrection is what God truly wanted. Yes, we can have doubts and disbeliefs, but as Christians, we should continue to wrestle with the idea, even if it doesn't make any sense. And when we keep on wrestling with difficult ideas, there will come a time when God reveals himself to us, so those ideas will eventually click, and all doubt will just go away. They will fade away. You know, difficult stuff, right? Hang on. Hang in there, guys. A few years back, I had some fun with the grade 12 students in High C. I still have fun with the current grade 12s, it's good. But a few years back, I actually had lots of fun with the grade 12s in High C. I won't name names, but there was one person who would always bring up the topic of predestination whenever he could. He's already graduated, but I believe some of you here would know who I'm talking about. Now, predestination is a very difficult doctrine that's been promoted by a famous Protestant named John Calvin. So if you need to remember the Protestants, so the first one is Martin Luther, the second is John Calvin, right? It basically means that all events, everything that happens on earth has been willed by God. Therefore, all our fates have already been decided. That's what the doctrine of predestination actually means. So, I don't know, maybe Ian or Joseph or Jaden, they're here because God has planned that ever since the beginning. Something like that, right? Everything has been predestined by God ever since the beginning. Now, if you think about it, it counters the idea of our free will, right? If God decided every event to happen on earth, does that mean that we don't have any choices to make on our own? Yeah, if I just drop this, for example, if I drop this clicker onto the ground, did God plan that? Well, that could be a thing that we can ask, right? So it's a very difficult doctrine to grasp. So this dude in grade 12 was constantly bringing this idea up whenever he could. Like on Friday Bible study, when we're talking about, I don't know, some random stuff, he just brings it up. And he's starting arguing with his friends. And it was crazy. But anyways, and I still remember having so much fun, bouncing the idea back and forth with this guy, both publicly and privately. I would just make fun of him on Fridays and stuff. It was really fun. Anyways, I personally think this is what we need to do for many of us, okay? If something doesn't make any sense in your head, hence you start to have doubts in your heart, you should just keep wrestling with it, right? Don't just say, oh, whatever. I'm not going to believe it because it doesn't make sense. No. You should keep wrestling with it. Yes, you should definitely ask me or other spiritual leaders that you can find. But if you still continue to have doubt, you should continue to wrestle with those ideas until the Holy Spirit resolves it for you. Don't just leave God and say, I've tried. Christianity is a scam, I think, because it doesn't make any sense. Don't say that, right? Because you're not any smarter than this guy, right? I'm not even smarter than this guy. So don't say that, guys. Because at the end of the day, experiencing God's revelation, whatever that God makes us to understand these things, it keeps your faith strong and deeply rooted in the Bible. So guys, continue to ask difficult questions, even if it means asking questions about Jesus' resurrection. And I mean it. It's worth it, okay? But what do you have to do? You have to be careful not to put it into an action, not to put your doubts into an action, such as leaving God or disrupting God's plan, like the religious leaders. So I'm going to finish now. As I close, there might be some people who would struggle to understand certain ideas of Christianity. It can be God's goodness and faithfulness. Why are there suffering in the world if God is good, right? Can be God's powerfulness or his capabilities. Why do some people still suffer if God is all-powerful? Why can't he just, get rid of all their pain? Or it can even be Jesus' resurrection that we talked about today. But guys, no matter what they are, I want you to keep wrestling with those things. Don't give up. but keep asking difficult questions to yourself and to your spiritual leaders. Can be your life group teachers, can be me, can be PJ, can be some other pastor that you know. But while doing that, be very, very careful so you don't end up becoming like the religious leaders in today's passage. So don't let the bird build nest in your hair. Don't. So I pray that you and I can continue to wrestle with these ideas and eventually come to understand the importance of Jesus' resurrection. Let's pray.